Welcome back, y'all, to the Church Street Podcast. Today we are going to be in the Bullpen, and this is our series that we take a look at the scripture from the previous week, this time where we get to continue the conversation. This past Sunday we had one of our pastors, Dr. Kiva Green, who preached an amazing sermon, and then we also had a guest preacher, Dr. Jan Davis, who was visiting us from First Methodist Mansfield, and they came and they spoke on this topic and on this theme, asking the question of us of, how big is your God? And so today we're going to continue that conversation. We are joined today by Sandy Robinson, who is our children's director, our family ministries director. She is wonderful. She's one of those people who I really admire how you're a doer and you get stuff done. And I'm grateful for that. And we also have Paul Beals, who's off camera. He is our producer today. And my name is Zach Stiefel, one of the pastors here at First Grapevine. And so again, as you are on a walk or sitting on your computer, maybe you're driving to work or home, we want you to be asking yourself this question: how big is your God? So I'm going to read for us the scripture this morning, that we read the other morning. This was from Isaiah chapter 55. We read verses 8 and 9. I'm reading out of the ESV version, which is, as I call, the extra spiritual version.
You have names for all of them, don't you?
I try, yeah. This is Isaiah 55, verse 8. For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. So Sandy, as we wrestle with this question of how big is your God, and you hear these words, what do you take away from it?
Well, a couple of things. On Sunday, I think both of the doctors mentioned that regardless of how big I would say that God is today, he's bigger. Mm-hmm. But it made me think about years ago when I was a member, just a regular attending person at church, and helping with youth just as they needed. There was as a volunteer. An opening came open in Sunday school for the 9th grade Sunday school, and this woman, Susan, had been teaching for years, and Mike Dawson, the associate pastor there, wanted me to teach with her, to be just the backup teacher. And I was like, I just really don't think that's my calling, or that's just not something I am qualified to do. And he was like, oh, Susan will lead the pack. Don't worry about it. She's been doing it for years. And you'll just be there as like the ministry safe, the second person. You'll just have to help a little bit. So after badgering, I did go ahead and say yes to it. And the second week that I was there, Susan announced that she was moving. Like, not next door or anything, but away. And so that placed me in the lead position for teaching. And I was like, I can't do this. You're going to have to get somebody else. And the pastor's son is in this class, and there's no way I'm going to teach that class with Rusty in there. And he's like, oh, Rusty doesn't talk to his dad. Don't worry about that. And so I found myself, getting into the Bible on Saturday night for sure, sometimes earlier, preparing for these lessons. And God did have a better plan, and God's thoughts were way bigger than mine, because that led to interim youth directing, and then youth directing, and going to youth certification, and here I am in children and family ministry. So I definitely don't think at that time my thoughts were the same as God's. He had big, big plans. And the other thing I think about it is to let it be an encouragement to you listeners out there that think, I can't do this. There's things I just can't do, because God will equip you. It might be challenging and uncomfortable, but God's big enough.
Yeah, I love that. One, I forgot your connection with Mike Dawson. This was a few months ago. I saw him at a pizza place, and he asked me about you, and I'd forgotten about that. But I do love that. It's a spiritual vulnerability to say yes. And it can be daunting, it can be scary, but what we see is so often when God is asking us to do something, which that's what God does, he brings us into it and then takes the burden away from us. That turned into a snowball effect for you to get to where you are. I'll tell a similar story of my call to ministry, or at least when I started to recognize that this is what I wanted to do, or what God was calling me to do, rather. I was at Oklahoma State, go Pokes, and while I was there, I was working at a summer camp in Tyler called Pine Cove, and had this amazing experience and was able to see and experience God do some amazing things in not only the lives of the campers, but in my life. And so I came back to school and I started to have these thoughts and this feeling and this nudge toward ministry. And I did the only thing I knew what to do. I called this cute girl and I said, "Hey, let's go for a drive." And many years later, my wife Cheryl and I can talk and laugh about that drive that we took and how even in that, I was sharing, I think I want to go into ministry. I think I want to go be a pastor. And little did we know that this was a call to ministry for me, but it was for Cheryl too.
Right.
And at the time, my thoughts were not his thoughts and her thoughts were not his thoughts, but God used even a drive through the middle of nowhere in Oklahoma to breathe something into us. I love how God does that. How we are called to bigger and higher and more than we could ever dream of for ourselves, because that's what our God does. And that's how our God operates. And so as you think about this, there was your call to ministry. As you think about your ministry here at Grapevine, and you're doing amazing things, and our children's ministry is wonderful. As somebody who has 2 kids in it, I can say that with a lot of confidence.
Appreciate that.
How do you see God continuing to show how big he is, even in situations like that?
Well, there was a lot to be done just to kind of shore up the family ministries, the team, as well as our building and just everything that we were doing. We had struggled with getting help and positions filled. So I found myself doing things that I wasn't necessarily, it wasn't direct one-on-one ministry with children. It was more preparing background things, like things like paint and things like freshen up the books and freshen up the toys and clean everything. Things that, again, I wouldn't say were my strengths, but more almost management kind of things that I did when I was in management with Kroger. More, what do you call that when you give work? You
delegate.
Yes, more delegating than I had done in ministry prior to this.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. One of my greatest mentors, whenever he talks about ministry, he says everybody has to have an MBA. The master's in business is what you think, but what he means is a mop and bucket attitude, that no job is too big or too small for anybody on the team. And I think that ought to be for all of us, for those of us in the car, those of us at home, those of us that are walking through the grocery store, that there is no job too big, too small for any of us. And God can use that to be a blessing. And I think that shows truly what we're talking about of how big our God is, that he can use something like picking up a piece of trash that you see on Main Street and throwing it away, that somebody can see that and maybe the next time they'll pick up that trash too. Or helping the mom who's struggling with screaming kids at a grocery store grab something from a top shelf. It's an easy thing for us to do, but it makes an impact and a difference, and God can use that. And this week in our services, Dr. Jan Davis specifically talked about God is Big Enough bracelets. And I love that. And there's something, I wear one, clearly, and many people do.
I usually do too.
Yeah. Well, that's what you say. But I've heard it preached before that these serve a couple of purposes. That sometimes when you are walking through a valley, or you're struggling, or you're going through a hard season, that you should have it face you. That when you look down, you are reading it to yourself. And there are some times where you're at this spiritual high, this spiritual level that you want to show the world. And so you turn it around and it reads out.
Oh, I like that.
So when you read it, you see God is big enough.
Yeah.
What if we operated that way? That sometimes we have to have the reminder for ourselves. God is big enough for this situation. God is big enough for this time of struggle. God is big enough for whatever it may be, this diagnosis, this test that I have to take, this promotion that I wish that I was going to get, this expensive grocery bill, whatever it may be. We have to remember God is big enough for me and God is big enough for this. And it's also worth saying, I see you. I see what you're going through. I see what you're walking through. Your God is big enough. And it comes back to exactly what we read in the scripture. For my thoughts are not your thoughts, God says. Neither are your ways my ways. So what can feel like something small to me, God can use for something big for somebody else. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. What may seem small or mundane or a nuisance to us from time to time, God can do something with it. And so for you, listeners, as you think about this, maybe you ought to be asking yourself the question, how big is your God? And how can that show up even in your day-to-day? So Sandy, do you have any final thoughts, final comments around this idea, around Isaiah 55?
I have it around the bracelets.
Yeah.
Strangely enough, I do not have it on today. Usually I have two. And I have two so that I can give one away. And it's happened, we were overseas, and a lady was sharing, and not totally understanding, but she was struggling with something. And so, and she looked at my bracelet, and I gave her one. And I've had people in, like, if I'm being waited on somewhere, ask about it, and I can give it to them. And one place that I go frequently close to my house said, well, in fact, there's two, can you get me some? And so I took them to the tire place and a clothing place so that they could give them out also. And I just think it's like you said, it's a small move, but it could have big consequences. Mm-hmm. And
I'll share one more story in that same vein. At one point in time, I was leading a grief group at a church that I was working at, and it was a church that hands these out. And in it, somebody came for the first time, just kind of showed up out of nowhere. And I was talking to them, and they said, well, I worked the drive-thru at McDonald's. And I was at a stage in my life where I was ready to end it. They were ready to take their own life.
Yeah.
But somebody happened to drive through the drive-thru, and she saw their bracelet, and so they handed it to her, and that was the reminder that she needed to
stay
survive.
The course.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And they have their website imprinted on the inside, so she looked it up, and that's how she found this grief group. Pretty amazing stuff.
Yeah.
And God can use anything to reach people. So again, we'll ask the question one more time before we let you go. How big is your God? Sandy, thank you for your time today. Paul, thank you for yours, and all the post time that you're going to put into this as well to make sure that not only we look good, but we sound good.
Good luck on that.
And that we get put onto all areas of the internet. We're grateful for you.
We are.
And we're grateful for you, listeners. So until we see you again, we hope you have a good one.
Bye-bye.